Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of the Expressive Watercolor Portrait Unit. Today we are going to complete a follow-along video of how to draw the man with the beard. I would like for you to have your lesson guide out, open to the page that says pen face practice. You should have this out and on your non-dominant side so that as you are working through the steps, you have the reminders off next to the side. You are going to need 3 different pens, the fine point Sharpie, the V5 pen, and the ballpoint pen. Go ahead and collect those now. I would like to do this, like I said, as a follow-along video. There are quite a few small details that I'd like to talk you through. So I'll have you begin as a follow-along style, and then once we reach the point where it's just filling in the solid black areas, then I'll let you go and you can do that part on your own. Now let's go ahead and begin by taking our V5 pen, and let's begin on the section just right above his nose where like sunglasses would rest. So we're gonna go ahead and let's do this part together. So I am just outlining this little part of the line, and then I'm gonna outline right before those little jagged sections, and I'm gonna outline right up to the white of the eye. So go ahead and do that. Notice I didn't add all of these little sections. I just did like an abrupt section that's like a line where it's all still solid. Now let's outline very carefully with our V5 the lid, and I'm leaving that little smidge of white, and I'm going to outline the highlight in the center of his eye, and then I'm going to outline the iris, and it goes all the way to the corner of his eye. So go ahead and do that. All right, now let's go ahead and fill in his iris with our V5. Goes all the way to the corner there. Now let's give ourselves an outline kind of going around and out for the eyebrow, just kind of like right before it gets all rough. We're gonna bring that outline all the way around his forehead. Let's also give ourselves the outline just on the side of the nose here. And there's a little white highlight that we want to leave. So we're going to outline around that white highlight and all the way to the edge of the nose. So we're leaving that little skinny white highlight, and then we're going to leave the little white highlight that goes under the bridge of his nose. So we're going to like leave this little sliver right here, kind of lifting up under. Then we can fill in his nostril. We're going to outline this little white spot directly underneath his nose. It just goes right to the edge of his nostril before it stops. Then we've also got this little section, like a triangle of dark, that's going to kind of fan out from here. I'm just going to fill in a little section of that triangle. All right, now we're going to give ourselves a very like kind of fluffy, loose outline of where his mustache is starting to get more see-through. This next step is to outline the section of his lip that's going to stay white. And the section down here is more rectangular. And we're just kind of outlining that general area so it can be kind of looser near the bottom. All right, now we're gonna go on the other side of his face, and let's add those 2 little eyelashes. Come up, and there's a little indent for his eyebrow. It slants back for the forehead. Now let's draw that line all the way down to where his beard is starting. All right. Now at this point, we're really, as you can see, just giving ourselves some outlines to make sure that we do not go too much into specific spaces. So we're just kind of giving ourselves the outline and structure here. Now to make this section that's gonna be solid black very outlined, I'm just gonna show myself exactly where this section ends. So I am going to follow along, and I'm trying to leave these little details that I see on the image. So I'm following along with my finger on the other side. So you should do this too. And we're just giving ourselves the outline so we know where to fill the solid black. Now I'm starting to go through the flower side, and now I've touched back to the forehead. So I know that this section is going to be solid black. So at this point, we are gonna go through and find the corners that are the tiniest. So I'm filling in these little tiny corners like in the eyebrow section and by the eye. And I am going to fill in up against the highlight on this side. I'm gonna fill in like up above in these smaller spaces and up into these little triangles. So we're just kind of outlining and giving ourselves a border so that when we come in to fill this with Sharpie, that we don't have any parts that we can't get because the Sharpie is too thick. So we're essentially just prepping this area to fill with a Sharpie. Now we're gonna take one last look and say, okay, is this really all solid black? And I found one little spot I'm gonna try to leave. We've got a couple spots over here I need to be careful to not go too dark for. But the rest is going to be just solid Sharpie. So I'm gonna cap my V5 and I'm gonna switch to my Sharpie. And I'm just gonna fill this in using small circles, not lines. We're just filling those areas in so that they are super solid. We want to avoid that tiny little highlight. Don't fill that little thing in. And we're just gonna fill this all the way down using small circles, not lines. We're gonna fill that all the way to where we gave ourselves that little outline. Now remember that this was just a generic shape. It was not precise because we were leaving ourselves space to help fade this out in value scale method. All right, so I'll give you a moment to get to this point. All right, now at this point, I am going to take my V5 and I'm going to add just a scribble line on top of that solid line, just to kind of break it up a little. And I'm gonna cap it. I'm gonna switch to my ballpoint, and I'm gonna do that same thing. I'm coming out with the scribble line, but I'm gonna help it to fade a little bit quicker. And I'm gonna look and say, okay, this is coming out a little bit farther here. And kind of is like a scribble texture all the way out to here. Okay, there's that little fade. Now let's take a look at this eyebrow section. I'm gonna draw in this little triangle. I'm gonna draw in this little line and this little line. So they're like three solid little lines. We've got some like dots here. I've got some like stipple little dots at the top of the eyebrow here. And now we're gonna add just some little marks. We're gonna leave a couple little light highlights underneath the eyebrow. And we're just adding these marks to make it match as much as we possibly can. We'll also use the ballpoint to come in and add some little lines kind of at the end of his eye and have that leading back. And now we're going to add these two little triangles that kind of jut out from beneath his eye. So we've got the 1 and then the 2, and then a little bit down here at the bottom. A little bit of value scale on the edge of his nose here. And I'm just going to help that to fade out using dots and light pressure from my ballpoint pen. Okay, now we are going to soften the value just directly on his brow bone, kind of coming out with a little value scale right above his eye, helping that to fade out to white. Now let's do this value scale by his nose. So we're going to use just little scribble texture, and then we're going to fade out to dots with just our ballpoint pen. And we're following along with our fingers so we can make sure that we're copying the values we see. Now let's go along the side of the nose and add a little scribble value. And then I'm going to switch to my V5 for the edging of the mustache here. So I'm gonna make some like circles like this, just very loosely. And then I'm gonna cover up some, and I'm gonna find specific white dots that I want to leave. And I might even in here outline a couple white dots. And then I'm gonna just fill that in. It's pretty dark, like directly under his little lip section here. And we are just gonna kind of start to fill that in. So using just scribbly texture. And you know, I think I am going to switch to Sharpie to fill in the rest of the ballpoint, or sorry, the rest of the beard. So let's switch to Sharpie, and we can give ourselves just a nice light outline. And this should go from where the beard is solid all the way around. We can look for any areas where we can say, I do not have dots or highlights here. For example, all of the section next to the mouth. So we need to save space for the lips, but this space like directly above the mustache and like under the nose right here is pretty much solid. So I might leave like 1 or 2 little dots. And there is the start for the little mustache. All right, now I'm gonna fill in the black to be solid for the entire left side of the beard. And then I'm gonna start making these little scribbles. And we wanna leave space for the lips. So I just kind of left an outline there. And now I'm just making these scribbles so that I've got like small amounts of white. So let's go ahead and just add some scribble texture. All right, so we've got a good scribble. Let's go through and eliminate some of our white. So I'm like choosing the white spots that are the best, and I'm making them less of a line and more of like a dot, making sure I don't have too many, so I'm picking the best ones. I'm comparing how many I should have compared to the actual photo, so I don't start out with like way too many. Looking to make these dots just smaller, so I'm just going through and just adding basically like dots of Sharpie. until I've eliminated more and more of those white dots left behind. Okay, now from here, I'll cap my Sharpie. I'm gonna grab my V5, and I'm just gonna use my V5 to make these like very scribbly, kind of scruffy little marks that go all the way to that edge where I can see that last little bit from the transfer. So I really am trying to copy the texture and the amount of like the frizziness that I see from that image. All right, so we're just going all the way around the beard with that kind of like scruffy, scribbly texture. We don't really need to do it along the bottom here, along the bottom where it's touching that shadow from the neck, but we are going to do it right before it goes up to the ear. And we have this little highlight that we want to leave. So I'm going to try to leave that highlight, and let's fill in this dark triangle beneath the ear together. And while we're here, let's do some ear things. So we've got this little section that's got a dark line that starts out thick. So we outline it and then fill it, and then it gets to be skinnier again. I'm gonna add the outlines to these other lines that we see. And again, we've got sections that are thicker that then get skinnier. I'm gonna add this little section of value directly behind the ear that's like nice and solid. And I'm gonna border the top of the ear for this section that's nice and solid. I'm gonna fill in that triangle while I've got my V5 out. That triangle is too tiny for a Sharpie. All right. Now I'm going to give myself just a nice little stipple edge for where it's turning into the beard. And now let's continue with our V5, adding the little stipple, so dot marks, and scribble edging right up against the top edge of the beard where it is coming in contact with the cheek. So we are gonna keep these scribbles and dots nice and tight up against that edge. It's not like a true value transition right here. It's really just that's the edge where it's starting to get a little looser. So we're adding our dots. We can add a few coming up into the face so that it ties it together. And now let's work on the lips. So we are going to come in, and first we're going to find this little triangle of black that kind of comes up into this space, and it lines up with the back of the lip. And we're gonna fill in the back of the lip triangle to be solid, and this little bottom section of the lip to be solid. We're gonna go through the bottom like this. All right, now we are going to add some dots to this top section. And we want the dots to be closer together near that dark corner, and some dots near that front as well. And then for the bottom lip, I'm gonna switch to my ballpoint pen. And I'm just gonna add a couple little lines very lightly coming down from the bottom, or from the top of that bottom lip. And I'm gonna add just a little bit of value to that top lip. A couple more lines on the bottom here, just to show that texture. All right. And let's switch back to V5. While we're here, let's fill in that dark section to the left of the nose. All right, now let's head up towards the top forehead section, and we're gonna begin on the flower where there's this line dividing We're gonna outline here, but don't forget to add these 2 white highlights. Then we've got the edge of this side of the flower. Okay, now I've outlined this little white section on the back of the head. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go around those little white spots. Let's go into the little corners here. I'm gonna go up against the edge and just like thicken it. I'm thickening that line so that it's nice and solid. Gonna fill in this top corner by the flower. And now everything on this side is going to be black. So I'm gonna leave that to fill in. I'll do that part with my Sharpie. Now I'm going to look at this little section on the forehead, and I'm gonna follow along with my finger on the other side so I can make sure that I am doing this as accurately as possible. And this is a part where we really want to make sure we're copying what we see. It is a part of the person that really shows who it is. The hairline makes a big difference if you get it right. Now let's take our Sharpie and fill in some solid parts of the hair. So we're gonna fill in this solid line and this space behind. And kind of like coming back from the ear. All right, now we are gonna switch to our V5 and let's add some little tight little scribbles just right up against that back solid line. Let's do a couple layers of that. And then we are going to add just these little dots, and we are filling this space by setting our hand down on the table and lifting and lowering our pen so that we can make these dots nice and even. And we're just filling in that space, and then we're slowly gonna make those dots have more and more space between them, more and more white space. We don't want to go too far out into the face, so make sure that you kind of like stop right where that hairline is. And I am going to come in with a ballpoint pen now. I switched, and I am adding just a little bit of the light like layer through here just to bridge that gap a little bit smoother. So we want to like have it start out with a solid black and have just like a value scale transition out to the little dots. We also are going to have a value scale transition out onto the head. So I am just adding like a little bit of value with my ballpoint pen to add that in as well. All right. Now let's switch back to our Sharpie. And we are going to fill in the section right underneath the neck. There is a little value scale, so I'm not going to fill in that space. I'm just going to add the solid black section by filling it in with my Sharpie. So let's do that together. All right, let's see what other areas we can fill in solidly. We've got a little bit of solidness through here. So again, I'm leaving the space where it's gonna actually transition and get lighter, but where it's solid black, I am actually just gonna go through and fill it in now to be solid black. Now I'm gonna do that and leave an outline of this highlight. And I'm gonna also just add this little section. And I'm leaving space so that when I need to transition out, then I have space to like get lighter and lighter. So let's go ahead and fill this in solid. All right, and let's do the rest. So we've got the edge of his little tank top here, and this triangle is pretty solid black. And I'm gonna add the outline of that highlight. And again, I'm not like going all the way to that rough edge with the Sharpie, but I am gonna fill this larger area with Sharpie so that it doesn't take me as long. All right, now I am going to switch to my V5 and I'm going to pay attention to the way that this fades out. So I'm going to just use a really tight line of scribble to go around this space, but I am paying attention to the actual shape that I'm trying to make rather than just assuming what it will look like. Got a couple little highlights that I need to keep here to be nice and white. And I'm gonna add just some dots on the edge. We've got a couple like lines coming out here from the back. So we wanna try to keep that directional angle the same. And then from the other side of the neck, those lines are kind of like reaching out in a similar angle. So we're kind of connecting those angles essentially. And then we'll take our ballpoint pen, let's switch here. And I'm gonna just come in and soften that value. I might take this chance to add some texture to the edge of my beard there. And to just overall make our value scales better. That's what we've got some time to do. Now we're gonna come in and use our V5 again. So let's switch for this little last section on our shoulder. Just gonna add some scribbles until we get to that point. I'm gonna add the little outlines that we see for our tank top here. I'm gonna add some scribble marks. And I'm just helping this to transition out with a smoother transition fade. So I'm really looking at the image now, looking back and forth to get them to match. I can use my ballpoint to come in and make these transitions a little smoother. I might also come in with my V5 and just like use this as a chance to narrow out the highlight that I have right here. I noticed that we've got a couple like dividing lines. So there's that little highlight. I might add like the corner to this section since I did it with my Sharpie. And now that you kind of get the gist, I'll let you guys finish up filling in the flower sections. You'll just go detail by detail, finding the sections that should be filled in to be solid while leaving outlines for the sections that need to stay white. So this is not for your Sharpie, this is just for your V5 to go through and to help you find all of these details and to add as much detail from the image as you can to help build the details to make it look even more like the reference photo. So you'll take your time, you're gonna go through and fill those in, which is the remaining step. And once you have finished, you must check your practice with me before continuing on to the final project. This is to ensure that you understand how to complete all of these basic techniques so that you'll have the best end result that you possibly can for your final. Thank you so much for following along. I hope it was helpful. And of course, if you have any more questions, make sure that you come and ask me. Thank you so much.